Golden.
I can see Chris in the little thumbnail as the intro's playing, and I almost made him spit out his coffee. Good morning, guys.
No, you should not scat over our opening sequence. You're not Ella Fitzgerald, Anthony.
I'm not trying. I'm just trying to make Chris spit out his coffee. That is my only goal.
I don't even know what genre the music for our opener is. Is this like acid jazz or new wave?
I think if you think too hard about it, then
it's Founder Funk. That's what it is.
We've been talking about problems this morning. I told Anthony this already, Stephanie, but I've been having a lot of problems with the women in my life, a lot of problems. And so I asked my advice. I said, Alexa, why do I have such hard time with women? And she said, I'm Siri, you idiot.
But just talking about hard conversations.
Alexa's answering why I'm so terrible at women behind you, right?
Shauna yesterday came to me and said, we need to talk. And I said, this conversation will be recorded for training and quality purposes.
Oh, it's Halloween, you guys. What do you do for Halloween?
I try to do nothing. I try to let my wife take the kids out for trick or treat, and I stay home and give out candy. But we live in a neighborhood that a lot of kids don't trick or treat, so I wind up eating chicken soup and watching TV.
I live in a condo.
Movie? Like, do you watch something? Like, you guys are the worst Halloween people. I don't know that we can be friends. This is my favorite holiday.
I live like in an area. I live above the school. And so nobody's coming there on Halloween. And then I'm in a condo building, so nobody's coming. But when where the kids grew up, like in our old neighborhood, there were kids everywhere. Like it was like a big, huge party in the neighborhood, and it was super fun. But the kids, I remember one year the kids dressed as zombies, like cute little zombies, and we went out for I don't know, like 2 hours, but we had to come home because they were like dead tired.
Oh, that was a long way to get there. You took
the whole
the
point
long
of
road.
You can't just be like, boom.
No, I mean, I just try to throw them out. Just get them out there early. Right. Yeah.
Emotional, damn it.
Similar, and it's actually similar to our topic today. It's best.
I was just going to say our topic today is closely related. What if your nervousness before difficult conversations is actually protecting you? Like, I'm having butterflies right now because Chris and I need to tell Anthony that he's no longer part of the show or later on. I'm kind of building up to it. But there's a shocking stat, weirdly enough. According to Vital Smart's 2021 study of 1,025 managers, leaders delay crucial conversations an average of 7 months before addressing them because they're mostly men. Stelly FD, founder of Close CRM, learned this the hard way when delaying a co-founder equity conversation that cost him 6 months of resentment. That avoidance nearly tanked the company before they restructured around honest, uncomfortable dialogue. Today on How to Founder, we are going to be talking about mastering difficult leadership conversations. I'm your host, Stephanie Hayes, and with me are my wonderful co-hosts, Chris Franks and Stephanie Hayes, that's spelled wrong, and Anthony Franco.
Literally, that's you. Oh, it's in there.
You get all three of us today, and we are going to talk about why we delay conversations, hard ones, what the cost of that is, and how you can do things differently. Okay. Anthony, Chris, can you both think of a time that you have chickened out on a conversation that was really difficult and it actually cost you more in the end?
Many times, Stephanie, many times.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. And I'm one of those people who has no problem just hitting things directly head on. In fact, I just had an experience like this yesterday, and it bit me in the ass. Anthony, ever happened to you?
I'm trying to think of a time. So I have the contrarian point of view on this topic today. So I don't avoid difficult conversations because I'm chickening out. I delay difficult conversations until I have my head wrapped around what is it, a me problem or is it a them problem?
That's exactly it, right? I don't avoid difficult conversations either, but I do avoid them until I have an answer or until I am certain about, like, I was always taught, don't come to a conversation with a problem, come with a solution. But that delaying really cost me some relationship equity.
Yeah, I think I look at it as, so if the difficult conversation needs to happen and it's obvious, an employee's saying lewd jokes in meetings, that is a difficult conversation that I run towards. I don't
Sure.
delay that at all. If it's a difficult conversation about one employee or one person getting under the skin of a couple others, I have to figure out, is it the person or is it the other people? And then there's a circumstance where there's also a circumstance where you need to have a very difficult conversation with with someone that can do damage, right? How many times have you been in this situation where you're like, you have somebody that has the keys to a particular really important part of your business, a critical client relationship, the passwords to your website, right? And if you have the difficult conversation, you know they may be a little volatile and could damage the company or damage other relationships or do harm, even if it hurts themselves. Like it's that kind of personality. So in those circumstances, I will delay. And I have to be honest, there have been many times where I didn't have a really good answer or a really good way of approaching a situation. And I've been passive aggressive.
You're usually aggressive.
And it worked. So I made their life a little bit more difficult and stopped being as kind as I usually am. And which
is a pretty low bar to start off with. Let's just be super.
I was gonna say
it's not like
no, you're getting me and
like
Stephanie. I'm the kind one. Stephanie insults us all the time, but no. So anyway, so I know I'm kind of diverting off topic here, not off topic, but I am taking this down a different path, which is I don't know. I see a lot of conversations online that makes it a virtue to have difficult conversations early, but you need to check yourself first. You need to check, is it you? And what is the damage of having that difficult conversation going to inflict on the rest of the organization before you run towards a difficult conversation? What do you think, Chris?
I have a question that I want to ask you guys, because I think that this frames up the question. And Stephanie, feel free to take us in a different direction if you don't like the direction I'm taking this, which is, what is a difficult conversation as a founder? Difficult conversations. I've had tough conversations. I've fired people. I've done all those sorts of things where I know that it's going to hurt this person. I feel bad about it, but it wasn't a hard conversation because it was the right decision. And I wasn't emotionally invested in that relationship. to me, the only really difficult conversations that I have is when I have some sort of emotional, including employees, right? Employees I care deeply about, part of my team that we built this company together. And that's when it becomes hard. So I want to just ask you guys, am I thinking about that right? Because I've had, quote unquote, tough conversations that don't feel tough to me. And then I've had
giving somebody bad news. That's a difficult conversation.
Or conflict, right? So many people are conflict avoidant, right? They really are. They will even, I've worked with men who are, strong, powerful leaders.
Men.
Strong, powerful leaders, but they still chicken out of anything that creates conflict, right? However, I think both of you just pressed on something that is really, really key to how we're thinking about difficult conversations. I've had difficult conversations where I've had to let someone go, but it was difficult in the sense that someone's receiving bad news, but I didn't find it like I wouldn't have avoided going into it because I was clear on what needs to happen. What I find difficult is when, so here's a really good example. I was in a contractual relationship with somebody that I had to pay money to on an ongoing basis, right? It was like a vendor buyout. And the company wasn't making enough money to cover the costs of the payment. Like it was really at the point where there just wasn't enough coming in, and we would have had to shut down if I'd paid her the money that we owed her, right? And so I was delaying having the conversation with her because I knew how the conversation would go, and I wanted to have a solution for her. I wanted to be able to tell her, we can pay you again on this date, or here's what I'm going to do about this. And I didn't have that answer. But for her, she was like, I would rather you have told me right up front and said, hey, the payment's not going to come out this month. I don't know what we're going to do yet. Like she wanted to hear that to her meant that I was being respectful. Delaying the conversation for her caused further damage because it was a sign of disrespect for her. So that's where things get a little bit tricky, because I wanted to be able to anticipate having something for her, and I didn't have that answer yet it was more damaging for me to delay. Because
that's a great point.
Yeah.
So, and looking for clarity, I think maybe framing in your head the problem and talking to the individual about the problem rather than your solution probably makes things a lot easier for them too. Like, here's what I'm struggling with. I'm struggling with that you're an asshole. And I don't know.
Wait, hold on, let me write this down. You're giving us some good material for our later conversation.
No, but I'm struggling with your position in the company because you're good at this and I need you to do this. And I don't know how to connect that divide, because the company really needs you to do this and be really good at this. This is what we hired you for. And you're really good at this, and they don't connect. So I don't know what to do about that. What do you think? And you don't have to have a solution. You have to present the problem in a way that they get to participate in the solution.
That's really tricky, I think, because especially with an employee relationship, by having that conversation, you're putting them in a position of worrying, right? Of being concerned for their work, their job. If it was a different conversation saying, hey, I want to change your position in such a way that it's really working towards, like, that feels better than I'm not sure what to do about your position, right? So in an employee relationship. But I do think that approach works really well in something a little bit different, like maybe you're in a partner relationship with a partner that you have a referral relationship with, something, and you can go to them and say, hey, we're changing tact, or this is not producing the results that we expected. I'm not sure what to do about it, and I thought maybe we could come together and have a conversation about it.
Let me qualify my scenario first and say, I have that conversation when I've come to the likely conclusion that this person's not going to be with the company anymore. So I'm not trying to move them. I'm trying to figure out if I can keep them. So I want them to worry about their position because their position's in jeopardy, and I want to give them an opportunity to correct my thinking on it and say, hey, maybe you haven't thought about this, or gosh, I didn't even realize. Like, give them an opportunity to troubleshoot it with me. I've had that conversation, I don't know how many times, more than dozens. And it's a 50-50 split. One way it goes is, oh my gosh, I totally didn't realize it. Here's the things that I'm going to do to change it and to kind of realign myself. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. The other 50% is, you're right, I'm really not happy here. I'm like, great, let's find a way to transition you out in a way that isn't awkward and gives you some time to find another place to land. So is that a difficult conversation? Chris, would you consider that a difficult conversation, or would you consider that just like, how would you frame that conversation in the context of this topic?
I think it can be a difficult conversation, but I think your approach is correct. And so, and really, I think the first part of this is the idea that we're having a conversation about difficult conversations with subordinates, with employees, because those can be tough, right? And you do care about your employees, and you know about their lives, and you know about their kids, and you know about, their husband getting laid off, and all these things that potentially can be a part of that conversation. So I think there's a couple of things that you hit on, which is the first one is that any sort of a difficult conversation shouldn't be a surprise. Like, if you get to a place where you're like, hey, let's make a decision about whether you're going to continue here, if it's been sitting in the back of your mind and you haven't had smaller conversations along the way, like, that's a real problem for the employee. And the second thing, which is there's a lot of in the coaching science world, which is what you talked about, which is being a collaborator in the problem, is the highest form of communication. But when you're talking about taking away somebody's income, their identity, their ability to provide for their families, there is a shit ton of fear there. And the moment you threaten that, defenses go up, you get a ton of pushback, and it's really scary for that other person. And so, Anthony, what you said is that the place where I've had the most success as well, which is like, hey, let's take income and employment off the table here, because I know a lot of people, I think you're amazing. I'm just not sure you're a great fit with us right now. And we'll figure that out. Well, let's just talk about fit and try to keep that the fear factor out. And of course it's going to be there, but if you can figure out a way to make somebody a collaborator and avoid defensiveness, that's really how you get to those good conversations, Anthony. Otherwise, the moment that fear, in the psychology of this, is the amygdala takeover, it's fight or flight. It's, you start to get lightheaded, your body is flooded with cortisol. There's no productive conversation to be had at that point.
Let me ask this. Are there a set of questions that we can ask ourselves before we go into, or when we're considering a difficult conversation, that help us decide whether this is something that we dive right into even without the clarity or the answers, or we do a little bit more thinking about how we feel about it, what our solution's going to be? Like, what are those determining factors that help us decide which way we go?
Chris?
So I think that it's really important as a leader to ask yourself, what's the outcome that you want to see in this scenario? And so in a lot of cases, Anthony,
Okay.
if I go and I have this conversation with an employee, I'm hoping they quit. I mean, if we're being honest, right? Person's a pain in the ass. I'm trying to manage them out of the organization. I'm trying to do it in an artful way where they can maintain as much of their dignity and self-worth as possible. if that's the case, that's fine, and you could still tactfully do that. Or are you going in a place of curiosity, of just like you're saying, Anthony, I'm struggling with this problem, and I need your help to help get my arms wrapped around it. And that comes from clarity of your perspective, I think, Stephanie. I think it comes from the idea that you need to be honest about what it is that you want from the situation, and then frame however you have that conversation around what you'd like that outcome to be, with the idea, Anthony, that sometimes it can change, right? You're like, hey,
it's been very, I've had very rare circumstances where I want somebody to quit or I want to fire them. It doesn't happen that often because I'm not sure. I've never been, so I can count on one hand how many times I've been certain I needed to fire somebody. The vast majority of people that I've fired or that have quit, I entered a difficult conversation not knowing what the right move is for them and for the company. So I do approach it from curiosity. I wish a lot more of these things are clear. They're just not. So asking people to participate in the problem, in solving the problem, it's genuine. Like, I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear how they're seeing it. How can we make this how is the company wrong? Am I wrong, or are they wrong? And then explore it with them together instead of going into it with a presupposition that this person needs to go.
So can we move the conversation away from just about employees and firing employees? Because there are 100 different, there are 100 different difficult conversation scenarios that we might need to have. We're about to fire a client, right? I have had difficult conversations with partners. I have had difficult conversations with, with employees for sure, with financial institutions. Like, there are so many difficult conversations, but I really am sort of like, I want to go back to the original question. Are there a set of questions we can ask ourselves that help us determine what the best way forward is? I think there are questions like, what's the impact going to be on the person that I'm speaking to? What would they need to, if I know what I want my outcome to be, what would they need to hear, or how would they need to feel in order for them to be well positioned to come to that conclusion with me? Is time of the essence? I think there's a whole bunch of qualifying questions that help us decide what our strategy is going to be. Because you may need to have a solution before you come to that conversation, because you know the dynamics of the conversation are going to be X.
I think you mentioned two things that are really important. One is, where's the misalignment? Because difficult conversations are basically saying, I thought this, you thought that. Something's not working, right? And so you need to be clear with what you thought was going to happen that didn't. And you also need to be clear going into it, what is your objective for having the conversation? If your objective is to feel better, like, oh, I'm glad I got that off my chest, don't have the conversation. Don't have it. It's not about you. But so you need to have a clear, measurable objective when you go into that conversation. Timing is certainly a part of it. Stephanie, I totally agree with you. What else, Chris? What else do you need to know going into those conversations?
Well, so I think in what Stephanie is saying is right, which is we've started by saying, hey, let's have hard conversation with employees, but that's a power dynamic that's different.
He's thinking really hard about it.
Did I freeze?
No,
I think it's you, Steph. He didn't freeze for me.
Oh, all right,
no, okay, sorry.
The power dynamic of having a co-founder relationship, or in your, like Stephanie, you're firing in a customer or something like that, it's a wildly different scenario. Now, I think this is the place where we acknowledge most difficult conversations start with some sort of a feeling. And those feelings, Anthony, they come from, I had a set of expectations that weren't met.
Mm-hmm.
I feel my feelings are hurt because your one feeling is hurt. I had a story I was telling myself that's not coming true. There's some sort of framework that I see the world that you see the world differently, and we can't align on that. So all those things are really important. But the secondary piece to understand here is you have to figure out a way to have to come to some sort of agreement. If you're a co-founder relationships, bad co-founder relationships tank great companies that want to be in the world, great products, great solutions, great teams.
Mm-hmm.
And a bad co-founder relationship, how many times have we seen it? I mean, it's happened. I know dozens of times. I'm sure that we could put together a list of 30 just because the co-founders can't figure this shit out. And it makes me angry because I'm like, guys, you've got product market fit. That's so hard. Don't let your egos get in the way of a great company. And so I think that notion about like, what is it that you expect? And I think, and Anthony and Stephanie, I think it starts well before you have to have the tough conversation. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, we had an episode about that not too long ago, that building that early foundation for your I think it was John or someone that they recommended you have a monthly touch point, and that just always happens. And so that foundation for communication in a co-founder relationship for sure. And I still think that it depends on the issue and the topic and that sort of thing, that you really have to think through some of these things. Like, what's the impact on the other person? What are they likely to feel? What would they want in this situation? What's going to get us to the outcome that we need as quickly as possible? Like, I just think there's so much nuance, and you can't paint. It's the same way that we talk about leadership styles. You can't say, I am this leadership style and that works for everything in my company. I think it's just nuanced. I think you've got to be able to run through these set of criteria that help you decide how you're going to approach a difficult conversation.
I want to reframe this for just a second. So going back to something you said, Stephanie, which is you're about to fire a client. I've been in that position before where I'm like, we need to get rid of this client. But I reframed the conversation in my head and also with the organization, with the company, not the client. So this client was being a jerk. They were just very, very difficult to work with, and they were being jerks to the company and to the team that was working with that client. And so I went to the team first and I said, look, this is a little scary, but I'm thinking about letting this client go. What? And they're like, yeah, these people are really miserable to work with. I said, what would be the conditions in which you would be okay with working with this client? And we brainstormed a little bit. Some of them said bonuses. Some of them said, putting constraints and guardrails around it, charging for changes, that kind of stuff, like essentially putting the client in their place. And then I had the conversation with the client that I wasn't fully intending on firing. And instead of saying, we don't want to work with you anymore, I said, I basically changed the terms of the relationship and framed the terms in a way that these are the terms by which we're willing to continue to work with you. And then they had to make the decision on whether or not they were willing to operate within those terms. So what that taught me and this philosophy that I've adopted over the years is it's never no, it's only about terms. It's like, what are the terms that this turns into a yes? And that helps for some strange reason, that helps me contextualize that difficult conversation. And we're just having a conversation about terms, about what's acceptable and what's not. And it becomes much more of a business transaction than an emotional transaction when I do that.
I love that reframe. And I think that there's probably something there we can tease out. Like, what are some of the reframes to these conversations that can help us walk into them? I think when we have a it has to be this outcome, we force ourselves into a no-win conversation. So I like that sort of thinking that there's a possibility that there's a different outcome than I'm imagining, right? And I also think that sometimes delaying the conversation actually gives you better information where the decision can become crystal clear. Like with these clients, we actually tried to fire them before we even started working with them. And then they came back and they wanted to work with us, blah, blah, blah. And we did. Throughout the whole relationship, we've constantly been saying, oh, we don't want to work with them again. But then something will happen. We'll be like, oh, maybe it'll be okay. And then we finally had a conversation this week where it was like, oh, hard no, like just we're done. Right. And so now it's not a difficult conversation at all. Like I have mentally gotten to the point where I'm like, yeah, it's not happening. Right. So I think if you can get into that mindset around what's possible and knowing what you want, but also keeping an open mind until you're very, very clear. Right. So Chris, do you have some of those reframes? Like, do you have something that helps you go into them not feeling like it's a win or a loss?
I think that the number one reframe you can do with other humans, because I think we've been talking about metrics with employees, et cetera. But the number one thing you can do is I can't at any point in time understand what you're thinking. And so if I come in as like, Anthony is so pissed off, like Anthony doesn't give a shit about me. He doesn't like me anymore. Like the reality is I don't know what Anthony is thinking, but the frame that I can approach is also oftentimes he's thinking about Seinfeld episodes, really is what I've come to understand.
Hell, oftentimes I don't know what I'm thinking.
Is you have to address things that are behaviors, and you can address behaviors because you can witness those behaviors. And so Anthony, I've been noticing you've just cut me off every single time I start talking, and then halfway through a conversation you turn around and leave. That's a behavior. That's not you're being an asshole and you don't.
You've been talking to my wife.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
In a business setting, for like as a co-founder, you can talk about the metrics of the business and the behaviors that we're both doing to try to say we're aligned to these goals. And so really reframing around things that you can see and witness and trying to avoid saying you're this type of person or you feel this way, which is you can, even if I'm correct, it's wildly presumptuous for me to say, I know what's going on in your life, right? It's who knows, right?
There's also something that just occurred to me that we haven't talked about that we really need to. And it's this notion. So when you conjure up this notion of having a difficult conversation or a hard conversation, you're basically feeling anxiety because a lot of times you're going to be surprising this person with this information, which in and of itself is a failure. If you're coming to somebody with, we need to have a hard conversation, and this is the first time they're hearing anything about it, you've already failed. If you're not continuously correcting and continuously providing feedback and continuously giving praise, as well as, hey, here's some corrective things that we need to see from you, or why don't you try this? Or so once you get to the point where you're like, ooh, I'm not looking forward to this because I'm surprising them, you've now gotten to a point where you've let it go too far. I have had a lot of conversations with folks where they've walked into, not a lot, but several, where they've walked into a room. I'm like, okay, we need to sit down and talk. They'll come in and go, am I fired? Because they knew, right? Because I've been having those conversations with them. Like, oh, yeah, it's about that time. It's like, we need to find you how to move you on, because I've been having that conversation with them continuously and they just haven't been able to correct it. Anyway, what do you think about that, Steph? Do you think if you're positioning it in your head as a difficult conversation, maybe you've already failed?
No, you make a really good point for once that I think
That's 2 this episode.
Well
Yeah.
done, Anthony. New record.
that I think having an early conversation about something might be the strategy, right? Like maybe it's not the full conversation, but it's at least preparing them for what might be coming. And it also can be exploratory, right? That early
Mhm.
conversation can give you more information, but it can also get them sort of thinking, and maybe that's really productive. Maybe they come up with something and they're like, hey, I just thought of this, right? So you're right. Like, but I still maintain that there are nuances to that, right? That there are different types of conversations and different ways to prepare for them, and that's going to change depending on the circumstance. But I do like that if you're going to get anything valuable out of this episode, I think that's the one, the shift to that Chris, or what's your name, Anthony, talked about earlier, right? So I'm going to wrap this up because we're at 40 minutes already.
Oh my goodness.
Last thoughts, last points you might want to make about, preparing for the conversation or getting your mindset right around the conversation.
I think
Chris, you got anything?
Yeah, the thing that keeps just banging in the top of my head is something we talk about all the time. Number one corollary between high-performing teams is psychological safety. Good teams have psychological safety, and your job as a leader is to create psychological safety. And if you create psychological safety, conversations are not hard. They can be, you can avoid those difficult conversations because you can continually give feedback. What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I think that was a great final thought before we jump into the speed round.
To add something, I reached out to my my partner, who is his superpower is empathy, and his whole business is about people and purpose and that sort of thing. I said, what helps you decide when and how to approach a difficult conversation? And he says, as soon as I can, when I know both the other person and I have the emotional reserve to have a successful conversation. So that's an interesting thing to think about too, is like, are we both on edge right now? When do we both have the emotional reserve to be successful in this conversation? And he says, how? As much as possible. I want to bring in as much context as I can, but not to develop an argument like a lawyer. Rather, I want to build as much empathy for the person as I can. And my goal in tough conversations is to remove the tough part from being a personal characteristic and make it an object we can both discuss with hopefully less emotion. So, just another perspective there from a longtime founder.
Can I add one more note to that, Steph? I had this written down, but you mentioned having this notion of empathy, and I think there's an empathy and objectivity paradox. When it comes to talking to anybody with a difficult conversation, one, you have to be very empathetic with the person that you're talking to, but you also have to have objectivity. So look at it from outside of the conversation and not look at it from their perspective or your perspective, but as a perspective, as if you're an independent third party looking at the situation. So those are directly in conflict with one another. That empathy, if you're naturally empathetic, that objectivity is going to be very difficult. And if you're naturally objective, that empathy is going to be very difficult. And you got to just, whatever your strength is, you got to value the other perspective, the other point of view.
Totally. Like his last sentence was, deep empathy and skillful separation of the person from the issue helps lower the stakes of the difficult conversation, in my experience. And that's exactly what you were just saying.
That's great.
Like that's the skill to develop, is how can I have deep empathy plus skillfully neutralize and separate the person from the issue. That's good. Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a great place for us to leave this on. Are we ready for the speed? Are you both emotionally prepared?
I don't know that I have the emotional resonance for that.
Stephanie didn't
Apparently,
care
I
if you
don't
were
care.
prepared, Chris. Whatever, Chris.
Whatever.
Your psychological safety.
Doesn't matter. All right, speed round. You both get to answer and quickly. Fire immediately when you decide, or give 2 weeks notice.
Immediately.
Give notice.
You're gonna give somebody 2 weeks notice that you're gonna
No,
fire
I'm
them?
going to pay him for 2 weeks. I'm going to have him leave though. Like I'm.
Oh,
you're
okay,
not-
okay.
Yeah. Crying during a termination conversation, unprofessional or human?
Totally unprofessional.
Depends. Is it me? I mean, then if I'm crying, it's a problem. If I'm the one that's firing, if I'm being fired, sure, you can cry. It's fine.
If Anthony's
Yes.
crying in any circumstance, then we've got a problem.
If I'm crying, the world is ending. So yeah, it's bad.
We need to have a cry circle.
We need to have an episode where we just talk about Anthony's feeling.
We really do. His one feeling. We really dig into that. No.
Delivering
there's-
hard feedback via email avoids conflict. Agree? You wrote these.
Totally agree. I totally agree.
Actually, I prefer text message or Snapchat.
Yeah. I was gonna say just it's Slack is the answer.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make it-
be
I'm gonna
hard.
make
A
it
hard
passive.
no on that. A hard no.
I'm gonna make a passive aggressive TikTok about it and then just send it to you.
Here's what I'll say is that it is fully appropriate to follow up with an email and saying, here were the things we discussed. Because in those moments, again, amygdala takeover, the person might not hear. And so you
Yep.
can actually send a follow-up email.
Yeah. The problem with that question is don't avoid conflict. Don't avoid it.
What percentage of underperformance issues are actually misalignment and not skills gap? 100,
Half.
110?
Half. 50%.
65.
I'm going with like 80.
Hey.
Written script for tough talks or bullet points only?
Oh, I don't do either of those.
I think bullet points are actually good. I think having a couple notes because conversations can wander, but if you have a written script, even the bullet points, you have to stay curious to Anthony's point. So would be terrible to have a script that you
Never say. I'm going to add one more to this. Never say that this conversation is hard for you. Never say that. Ever. That should be the only bullet point. Don't tell people that this is hard for you to have. Terrible.
I'm really struggling with this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm going to fire you.
Yeah, exactly. Never do that.
Okay, Chris, founder fundamentals. What did you learn, if anything?
I wrote down a ton of notes. Delaying conversations can actually be disrespectful to the person you're delaying. You need to be clear about what the real problem is. Identify your objectives going into it. What do you want from that conversation? Approach the conversation with genuine curiosity. Ask questions of yourself and what's going on with you before you enter into the conversation. The level of difficulty of the conversation is directly related to the level of trust. If you have no trust, it's going to be a very difficult conversation. If you have high level of trust, it should be easier. Reframe the conversations to talk about facts and behaviors. Don't surprise people. Difficult conversations are a failure of continuous feedback. Psychological safety, make sure you have psychological safety can help diffuse difficulty of conversations. Acknowledge the empathy and objective paradox. And I wrote this down, Anthony, because it's just this continuing theme. As per always, you have to develop self-awareness. And then I just wrote down a quick note. Never say this conversation is hard for you. Don't say, this is really hard for me to have this conversation about firing you. It's very difficult.
Nothing like a little gaslighting and narcissism to make a difficult
I just
conversation.
throw in a little narcissism into the brew,
All right.
into the witch's brew.
I have some deep dive resources for us. Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High by Carrie Patterson, Joseph Grenny, Ron McMillan, and Al Switzler.
Switzler.
AI Switzler.
It could
AI
happen.
Switzer.
It could happen.
Oh, yeah.
All right, terrific
Awesome
discussion today, everybody. I really appreciate.
We're not closing yet. This is the wrap.
We're not closing yet?
No,
All right.
just hold your horses. We have all had nervousness before. We have had hard talks. It's actually a secret weapon for you to develop better leadership conversations, and know that this is a continual evolution of your continual evolution of skills as a leadership or as a leader. Talk today. And dive into this conversation. Hopefully you've had some good points for it. Anthony, do you want to close us off?
Well, speaking of Anthony, would you just hang on after we get off the air? We just have a conversation we need to.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's going to be really hard for us, but
It's gonna be really hard.
No,
for me to have
it's
this
gonna be really easy. It's gonna be really easy, for you guys. I'm gonna make it really easy for you. Thank you everybody for listening. Please be sure to visit us on howtofounder.com, where you can connect with us on LinkedIn and subscribe to us on our YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify channels. Please leave us a review. That would really help us out to extend our reach. All of us believe this, that you are the pioneer of economic prosperity, and truthfully, the three of us are very grateful to be there along the way with you. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.